Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dillon Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you. Hey, it's me again. We are doing another one of these kind of semi-story-time episodes, I guess you could call it. Leave a like as well, but I was trying to say leave a comment down below if you guys are enjoying these types of episodes, these little breaking up the real sciencey talk in between what Bill has to say for a little bit of a story time. So without further ado, let's get into what I wanted to share with you guys today. For today's episode, I think I wanted to talk about one of the trips that I took with Bill, my grandpa, down to Bakersfield. So this was this was during COVID, either during or just at the beginning of COVID, because it was like one of the very few times, I think it was just before, like right when COVID was starting to become like an international thing, and was before lockdown, but it was real close around that time. But anyways, it was one of those things that we took a trip down to Bakersfield to a few grape farms, or a grape farm, and it was really, really interesting. So from where we are, it's quite the drive down to Bakersfield, or at least to me, it's quite the drive. It's several hours. To Bill, not so much, because he is very, very used to driving all up and down California and around the country and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure he basically sipped his coffee and blinked his eyes a few times and was, oh, hey, we're in Bakersfield. But for me, we got up real early in the morning, headed down to Bakersfield to go and talk to some of the people that Bill is working with and kind of go over what the plan was and what the deal was going forward with their grape farm. And just so happened that I believe their grape farm is one of the grape farms that produces the cotton candy grapes, the grapes that taste like cotton candy, which to me personally, I really like them, but in very small quantity. It's like one of those things where when you take them out of the fridge or the freezer, wherever you want to store them, I'm good for about 4 or 5 before I'm like, all right, that's enough. Maybe 3 to 5 grapes that taste like cotton candy. I think that's the limit for me, just because they are super, super sweet, but it's incredible how they just taste exactly like cotton candy. Like, I don't know, I'm not in tuned enough with how all of the plant genetics and all that kind of stuff works to know how they're able to make them taste like that, but it's quite impressive. And I thought I'll never forget the first time Bill came home. I think I was spending the night over at his house, my grandparents' house, and he was all excited and to have me try these cotton candy grapes. This was like when I was real little. Like I might have been, I don't even know where to guess how old I was. 10, something like that, in that range, plus or minus a few years. Anyways, he brought home some grapes from the people he was working with, and it was like, try these grapes out. They taste like cotton candy. And sure enough, popped one in my mouth and was mind blown. Like, holy cow, these things are grapes and they taste like cotton candy. That is super impressive. But then, like I said, I'm good for about 4 solid grapes, and then I'm like, all right, it's a little overwhelming of a cotton candy taste, but nonetheless impressive. Anyways, back to our Bakersfield trip. Going down to Bakersfield, got up real early, like I said, in the morning to make the drive, and like I said, Bill just chugging his coffee on all the way down the highway. Me, on the other hand, I was unaided in my attempts to try and stay awake and super alert and all that kind of stuff. I did not have coffee or any sort of energy drink or supplement going down there, so I was quite tired or quite groggy on our way down. But once we got there, it was super interesting. We pulled into a dirt road, and the thing about Bakersfield is, to me at least, in the passing through it that I have done, and also this trip to it that I have done, it is all farm. It is primarily just, you name it, it's farmed. It's almonds, walnuts, or almonds and walnuts, pecans, grapes, all kinds of stuff down there. And just for miles and miles and miles on end. For anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of going to Bakersfield or passing through Bakersfield, just trying to paint a little picture here for you. But yeah, just miles and miles of just pure farmland. And these farms are owned by farmers who own a lot of land. So like around here where we're located, it's not... It would be unusual for someone to have like 1,000+ acres, I'd say. Or at least it's not as common. You go down to Bakersfield and that's like the norm. It feels like it almost feels like everyone, you're in the 1,000 acre club. But anyways, I digress. I thought that was very interesting whenever I was down there, because everyone seemed like a huge farmer, and I was not used to that. So, but anyways, this grape farm that we went to, we showed up, and like I said, we talked to the main guy that my grandpa was working with, and just kind of was going over the plan and all that kind of stuff, catching up on what had been going on, because it'd been a minute since my grandpa had been down there. And so then we went out and drove into, like, down the side of some of the rows of grapes, and there were different, I want to say there were different varieties every so often or something like that. Like every so many rows there's a different variety. I could be wrong about that. But anyways, so we popped out of the truck, and I can't remember why we were doing it. I'm going to take a stab in the dark here, but we popped out and we had these like rubber bands, basically. Like, they almost look like exercise bands, but they're not exercise bands. They're used to like tie around limbs, or like tie limbs to support poles and stuff like that. But what Bill and I did was we grabbed a bunch of these little rubber bands, basically. Not the super small ones. They're thick, like I said, almost like exercise bands. And they're various colors. We grabbed some of those, and then we walked down the rows, and we tied them around periodically. Some of the, I think it was either the sprinklers or like the actual, like we'd get about halfway, 2/3 of the way through a row, and then we tie it to something. I don't think we tied it to the actual grapevine themselves, like the base or the pole or whatever they're attached to. I'm pretty sure it was like the irrigation system. But anyways, we were tying those down there, and I'm pretty sure the reason behind that was because when we were tying the colored bands to the irrigation systems, I think it was for Bill to be able to come back later and figure out, like, okay, for these rows I'm doing this program, for these rows I'm doing this program, for these rows, so on and so forth. Fertility wise, I could be completely misreading that or misremembering that, because it was like 5 years ago, something like that. But I want to say that was the reason that we were doing that. And we did that to several different plots of grapes out in the just middle of nowhere. Bakersfield, of course. And yeah, so once we were done with that, going up and down a bunch of rows of grapes for a while, we packed up and then we went to another farm, and I believe this was a walnut farm. It was a walnut farm in its infancy, though. If it wasn't a walnut farm, it was definitely an almond farm, but I'm pretty confident it was a walnut farm. And now that I'm actually thinking about it, I think it was an almond farm. So we'll just say it's an almond farm. Went to an almond farm, and there was a couple the dudes who my grandpa was working with who owned that farm were there as well. And so we went there and we were talking to them, and we were debating on whether or not some of these trees, because like I said, it was a fairly new orchard, and so we were going over like, hey, yeah, I think it's best to just yank these guys out, or there's no point because this, that, and the other reason. And so we were just going back and forth about all that kind of stuff, and then we were also going back and forth about we being Bill and the guys he was working with. Of course, I was just kind of there overseeing everything that was going on. And so Bill was talking to them about like the program that he wants, and like kind of basically trust the process. It's gonna work out and all this kind of stuff. And here's some advice on these trees, and if you should just pull them out or if you should just leave them in the ground. I can't for the life of me remember which side he was on, Bill, whether or not he wanted to pull them or not. I want to say he wanted to keep them just to catch them up, but I could be wrong. Like I said, it's been 5 years, and this is out there. But anyways, after we were done with them, we took another ride around. I want to say we went to another grape farm and did the same thing with the bands. And the bands, that took a while. And it was tough too, because you would go down about halfway to where the irrigation system, like the head of it was, and then you would tie the band around whatever, like a pipe, a metal tube, whatever. And then you'd have to like pick a spot in between the grapevines and like kind of shimmy your way through into the next row, and then do the same thing for the next row. And we'd go down, I can't remember, we went down a lot of rows. So that was quite interesting. And just crossing your fingers you don't accidentally trip or get your foot caught or something like that and fall on your face into the next row going underneath these grapevines. Not ideal. Or even worse, you trip over it and pull something out that you're not supposed to pull out, and then now that's a whole ordeal and blah blah blah. That was not the most secure way of probably going about the business, but it was effective. So after we were done with the grapes, we then packed up again, and then just kind of did a little ride around where we just kind of were driving up and down some of the roads in Bakersfield. Bill was telling me a story about how he basically got introduced to the area around in Bakersfield, or like not necessarily introduced to Bakersfield itself, but like got some more people to work with in Bakersfield. And he was saying, and I'll leave the majority of this story for him to tell at some point, because he'll obviously know more than I do and will tell it much better. But the general basis of the story, which I thought was fantastic because I thought it was awesome, was that he basically had a guy that he was working with down in Bakersfield, and he was doing business with him, had him set up on his fertility program, and it was all fine and good. And there's this other guy, this other farmer, who had a much smaller farm, like I can't remember if he said 20 or 40 acres, but comparatively to everyone around, it was significantly small. And basically because the original guy that Bill was working with was like so good to him, and like they had a good rapport going on, he took a look at this other much smaller farmer's land, or like farm, as kind of like a, you know what, because you're you've been so like cooperative and we've been so successful together. I'll take a look at this guy and help him out a little bit. And so this orchard that was quite small, that was struggling quite significantly, Bill took into his hands and basically applied his fertility program and his fertility philosophies and everything that we've talked about on the podcast so far, and kind of rejuvenated it. And he got significant results, significantly good results in a relatively short period of time. And so other people around in there saw that this smaller farmer, like, holy cow, this guy's trees are looking fantastic. How did he turn it around so good and all that kind of stuff? Well, it's because Bill's fertility program and his teachings, I guess you could say. Like I said, you can find a bunch of it in the podcast episodes that we have uploaded so far, so definitely go back and check those out. But he basically revived this field that was having a hard time, and other farmers around were like, holy cow, well, if you can do that for him, could you do that for me? And then so on and so forth. So it just kind of cascaded from there. So I thought that was super, super interesting. That's like the Clip Notes version of the full story. And like I said, Bill will have to tell you the full story at some point on his own, because he'll be able to tell you much better than I could. But I thought it was cool. I also, on the same trip, we were driving around, and that's the first time I ever saw a pecan orchard. Pecan trees are really, really cool to me. I think they're the prettiest tree that I've seen that's farmed for its fruits and nuts and so on and so forth. Because of just how tall and like thick their trunk is, and how they're mainly just because of how tall they are. And the way the pecan trees that I saw in particular were pruned was very unique. It almost looked like, I don't know, it was very, very vertical, which, I mean, obviously it's a tree, right? But it was like, it didn't branch out. Like, there wasn't a big canopy on the limbs or anything like that, given it wasn't the time of year where they were, like, there was no leaves on the trees or no blooms, nothing like that on the almond trees or anything like that. I think this was like summer, or not summertime. Can't remember. Anyways, there was no tree, there was no leaves on the trees at this point in time. And so I thought they were very, like, I keep going back to the word marvelous trees. Subsequently, we also have pecan trees that we farm at our farm, which I think is kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing those trees fully develop into the big trees that they can be. But yeah, that was the first time I ever seen a pecan orchard, and I thought it was very, very cool and interesting. And I did not know that pecans are kind of like one of those potentially new type, not new nut obviously, but like a new popular nut to start farming. So yeah, I thought that was super, super cool. After our little ride around, just to kind of see, like I said, Bill was like, you want to see a pecan orchard? And I was like, sure, why not? Because at that time, we were just barely getting into planting pecans, I believe. And so he wanted me to see what like an actual full-on pecan orchard looked like when it was established. Because they're also slow-growing trees, and they last for a long time. So it'll be a hot second before the pecan trees that we farm are actually matured enough to where they're like big, beautiful trees. But yeah, so then after we did that, I want to say that wrapped up our trip, because it was getting later in the afternoon, almost early evening type of time. And it was about time to get home because, like I said, we were in Bakersfield, and Bakersfield's several hours away from where we are. And so it was about time to get some food and go home. I can't remember what we got to eat, and that's kind of a shame. I want to say it's probably just some drive-through or something, but I could be wrong about that. Like I said, it was 5 years ago. This was a long time ago. Lots of stuff has happened in between, but I want to say it was probably some sort of drive-through. Burger King is what's coming to mind, but I want to say it was Burger King. That might be good. And I might have gotten chicken fries, and chicken fries are very, very good. Just throwing that out there. But I want to say that's what we did. And then, yeah, got home. I got dropped off, and it was awesome. I had a phenomenal day, kind of just seeing what the day in the life of Bill Brush was. It was very insightful, and I was very curious as to like what his consulting, what a normal day in his consulting life looked like, and it was cool. I liked it. And also, it was one of 2 trips that we took, so stay tuned for that, because I'm sure there will be another one of these little storytime episodes entailing our other trip, which was to Chico, actually. So, in however many weeks from now, whenever there's another one of these episodes, it might be about Chico. So, if you like Chico, stay tuned for that. But I think that about wraps up this episode today. I hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And always stay curious.